Today, you're going to learn 3 things that you can change about one specific area about your communication skills, and it will fundamentally change not only how people perceive you when in an interaction, when in a meeting, but also what you get out of your communication. I'll give you a perfect example. A few years ago, I went to a business conference, and this was a conference I saved a lot of money for. You get to ask the organizer of the event, who's this multi-millionaire, one single question in those 2 days because there's obviously hundreds of people there. And when it was finally my turn, the question I asked was, hey, I love what you're doing. How can I arrange an event like this? Because I'm a public speaking coach. I want to get people in a room. And he paused for a bit and he said, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a public speaking coach. And he said, and you came here to learn how to grow your business? I said, yes, that's why I'm here. So he said, of all of the questions you could have asked me, that's the one you think is the most important to growing your business? The entire room was quiet. And in that moment, not only did I know he was right, but I felt stupid. I felt stupid because I was so in awe of the event that I figured, hey, how can I do this? But I wasn't asking the right question. I could have traveled all the way out there and wasted my money asking the wrong question. So today, I want to teach you why it's so important to learn to ask the right questions and 3 components about asking questions in a certain way that will get you the most out of your conversations, okay? The first one is asking the right question. Depending on what you want out of the person you're asking the question from, it will change what inputs you give. So I run a public speaking community, and people come in from all walks of life, and they have questions about overcoming their anxiety or doing well in their pitch meetings. But sometimes the questions they'll ask will be something like this. How do I become more confident? How do I not be scared? How do I improve my vocabulary? Notice these questions are very broad, very general. It does not allow me to understand their situation. And if I don't understand the situation well enough, my answer is going to be full of fluff. So if they say, how do I become more confident? I could answer by saying, oh, you have to acquire the skill. Or I could say, oh, work on your mindset. Or I could say, remove the things that are making you unconfident. I can go in a variety of different ways just because the question that was asked, it wasn't appropriate. Here's the other thing with questions. The quality of the question you ask will help other people understand where you are in your journey. So let's say you're starting a business, right? And you ask, how do I get a client? With that question alone, I know you're at the very start of your journey. You have no idea what you're talking about right now because you don't even know where to get a client. But if your question was, I've exhausted my acquisition channel where I get my clients through email, what other acquisition channels can I pursue? Now I know you've already tried it and you're looking for something else. Now I can give you a much better answer. So being more specific and less vague with your questions will help other people understand what you really need. Number 2, this is the structure of the question itself. If you want to be perceived as someone who is intelligent, who is sharp, you want to think through your question before you ask it. And I'll give you an example. Many times when I'm on a Q&A call, and oftentimes I'm at a university and people are asking me questions, the way they ask those questions, they are verbalizing their thoughts for the first time out loud. So this is what the question would sound like. Hey, thank you so much for being here. Very, very helpful so far. I'm in a lot of trouble. I don't really understand what to do because whenever I'm doing a presentation, I'm so scared and I have all my notes with me, but I still can't really do it properly. And I have 3 presentations a week that I have to do and I'm really scared. I've looked at a lot of videos and I want to overcome this issue. I don't know what to do. Can you see how they haven't processed the thoughts in their head themselves? So what they're doing is they're verbalizing their thoughts. They're throwing unprocessed thoughts at me. And now it's my responsibility to untangle the mess of their thoughts, find the question, and then relevantly answer the question. So not only am I restructuring your question for you, but then I have to find out what question you're actually asking and then also come up with an answer that answers the question that I don't even know you're asking. Can you see how that gets so confusing? So many times people will mix 2 or 3 questions together, or they won't know what they actually want. They're just ranting. And by the end of it, I'll have to ask, I'm not sure what your question is. Could you summarize that for me in one sentence? Oh yeah, I want to know if I don't have notes, how can I not be afraid of public speaking? Okay, great. Let's talk about that. So, knowing what details to remove is extremely important. This is why what I recommend you do is before you ask a question, you write it down, because you're not going to write down that entire paragraph that I just said, because you know it sounds fluffy, no one's going to understand you. Instead, you want to start with the question and then add all the relevant details. So in this example, you can say, how do I ace a presentation without using my notes? For context, now you add detail. For context, my presentations are usually 45 minutes long, and I want to make sure I'm not forgetting any important details. Can you see how much more concise that is? How much easier that is to understand? I don't have to untangle your thoughts to understand what you're trying to say. So the structure of your thoughts not only shows that you've taken the time to think about what you're saying. It's not a lazy question. That's the other thing. When you haven't processed your thoughts and you expect the person you're asking the question to process them for you, it shows laziness. It shows you haven't put in the work to ask yourself that question before you ask somebody else. And number two is you're going to get a much better answer just because the question is clear. Fuzzy question, fuzzy answer. Fuzzy question, fuzzy answer. Make your question clear and specific. The third component of asking right questions is asking relevant questions. Asking a question you can only ask that person or that person specializes in. So, for example, we had a guest come in, and this guest is a very, very difficult person to get a hold of, and they were teaching public speaking tips at the highest level. And some of the questions I was getting from my community were, what is your favorite fast food to eat? Do we really want to be asking that question? We brought an expert who has very little time. A lot of time goes into bringing these experts in to train the members on public speaking. And now that they're here, is this really the question that we want asked? The other thing about relevancy is it relevant to the person? And is it relevant to the situation? So if the discussion right now is on, let's say we're talking about public speaking anxiety. And the question you bring on is, how do I pass a PhD exam? Well, that has nothing to do with the discussion at hand. So I hope you can see the types of question you ask and who you ask the question and what point in time you ask that question. It significantly affects how you are perceived. It significantly affects the quality of the answer you get. And it also affects how everyone around you is benefiting from that time. So if people came in expecting a discussion on how to buy stocks and how to invest your money, and then your question is, well, I think XYZ is a scam. I don't want to do it. Now you're derailing the entire conversation and you're asking questions about things that are not relevant. You're not going to look good. You're not going to benefit the conversation, and other people will not value from the discussion. So making sure the question you're asking is relevant to the person, relevant to the situation, and relevant to the discussion going on, it improves the quality of the discussion taking place. So let's bring this all together. The first one, what question you ask. Is this the real problem you're trying to solve? I'll give you a quick example again. I had a person who was deathly terrified of getting on stage and talking to people, and his question was, how do I tell better stories with fewer filler words? I said, I understand that question is important, but is it important for you right now? Right now, you can't even get on stage. You're saying no to every single opportunity. Do you really want to work on your filler words right now? Is that the main focus? It is not. So learning what question to ask and in what order. Number two, structuring the question. Don't process your thoughts out loud and expect the other person to untangle and find your question and then answer the question. Clarify that in your head. Write the question down. If you are going into a presentation where you know there's going to be a Q&A, write it down. Because it shows you're not lazy. It shows you've come prepared. It shows you're not a beginner. And number three, make your questions relevant to the person, relevant to the situation, relevant to the discussion, and do not derail the entire purpose of the discussion at the moment. So these three things, when you implement them, and you ask not only other people, but you ask yourself the right question, you will come across more intelligent, you will sound more like an expert, you will sound like someone who's benefiting the discussion and benefiting other people. Asking the right questions is a huge component of being a top 1% communicator.